Good evening, science lovers. I'm Shades. It should be clear by now that Dr. Lisle's arguments are pure sophism. That is to say, his only goal is to win the argument. He is not interested in representing the truth. He only manages to impress Christians who want him to be the savior of the faith.
They say things like science says. You probably heard people say, well, creationists say this, but science says. Well, science doesn't say anything. Science is a set of procedures. It doesn't have a voice. Scientists say things.
When a scientist says that science says, she means simply that the vast majority of the most reliable scientists agree that the overwhelming evidence is such that a certain statement is true. To make a statement like the one I just uttered every time you talk about science would be too much of a hassle. So I will continue using the phrase, science says. Then Dr. Lisle starts talking about creation scientists. For a creation scientist to exist, there should be creation science. For a creation science to exist as a valid science, it should have a theory. Up to this point in time, 2013, creationism has only managed to be a criticism of evolutionary theory. It has no theory of its own. It also lacks coherent terminology. For example, the word kind has never been defined properly. Creationism presupposes an act of creation, the idea of which springs from the notion that anything as complicated as life cannot just appear out of lifeless matter without a person or a mind who made the cells and at least some kinds of organisms. This is a fallacy called appealing to intuition. If we, for the sake of argument, accept this presupposition, we end up facing more problems. How did the Creator create? You cannot answer this question simply renaming creation science intelligent design. You still haven't answered the question. What were the physical processes and in what order that the intelligent designer used when forming order out of chaos? The biggest problem the creationism has is the wealth of evidence against it. The creationism has a tradition of pointing out the individual pieces of evidence that challenge the evolutionary theory. When each one of these get their explanation one by one, creationists move to the next so-called unexplainable piece of evidence. This is a fallacy called moving the goalpost. The creationists overlook millions of pieces of evidence that point directly to evolutionary theory being valid and true. For example, just to explain how the radiative adaptation took place after the flood would be impossible if we accepted the flood story as a historical fact. All the animals simply would not have had time to reach the habitats they live in now, and all the species and subspecies would not have had time to emerge from the few kinds that fit into the 140-meter-long ship. And keep in mind that even if the creationist managed to show that evolutionary theory was wrong, he wouldn't have shown that creationism is correct. That claim would be a false dichotomy. So-called creation science also lacks any connection to applied sciences. Current studies of immunology, ecology, and so forth are all based on the fact that evolution occurs exactly as evolutionary theory gives us reason to believe. It simply works. Medicine cures, unlike prayer. So, when Dr. Lisle points out that when someone says, science says, as opposed to creationist says there is a fallacy. He is right about that. It is called a category mistake. That mistake has no bearing to the fact that as the creationist is talking, he is not talking as a voice of scientific community. He is talking as a member of a marginalized group trying to validate its claims as scientific community and science move forward. Dr. Lisle is making a red herring fallacy, trying to steer us away from the main point, which is there is no creation science to refer to. Scientific community is not monolithic entity, and it's not infallible, as Dr. Lisle tries to state as fact. Please notice that the people who accuse science of claiming infallibility are the same people that accuse science of failing to tell the truth because so-called scientific truths keep changing. Make up your minds, folks. There is no conspiracy on behalf of scientific community. All the scientists are trying to show the rest of them wrong. That is how science proceeds. So, bye-bye for now.